When I said that God is not a woman, I mean it, because there is no way that a woman would put us through everything that we have to go through just to manifest our so-called fairy tales.
So now we're coming after God. This is a very feminist way of looking at God, by the way. Most feminist women and modern women who really are like claim the independent feminist flag, they really don't like the concept of a father. They don't like the concept of a God who is a father. The way the Bible writes it, they're upset about it. They don't like that the Bible talks about how a woman is supposed to submit to a man. All that, right? They're against it, don't like it. And the question here is, when does life work the best for women? When they follow those standards or when they do things their way with no regrets? I'll let you answer that question. That's it. Let's keep this.
Or our fairy tale ending. The choices that I ended up not making, pursuit of marriage and kids and this and that sort of thing, it wouldn't have cost me anything by way of, disapproval of family. My mother was raised Catholic. She was a day girl in a convent. Her parents were from the Eastern European bloc. She lived in Europe until she was 15 years old when her family immigrated to Canada, and her mother died shortly after they had immigrated. My mother was 15, almost 16 years old. And my mother ended up meeting my godmother in the same high school, in the same grade as I met my best friend, but 30 years apart, which is so cute and so funny. And when they met, they're both from the old country and they'd both been raised Catholic. They both said to each other, let's make a pact. If we ever have female children, we're not going to raise them Catholic. There's something about Catholicism that makes women feel like they're second-class citizens, like they are there for that marriage is a sacrament, and it's a holy sacrament, and you are there to obey your husband without any consideration as to what you may need, what you may feel, what you may want. And they had seen their mothers and their grandmothers and their aunts live lives that did not belong to them, and they decided that that was not the lives that they were going to give their female children.
That is disingenuous. And I'm not here to talk about any particular religion in specific, but if you're basing this off biblical principles, then yes. If you value what the Bible says, which, by the way, they also don't want you to do that. You want to say things you're not supposed to say. You're not supposed to say that the biblical way of approaching marriage is right. If you value that, you're allowed to live your life any way and which way you want. God doesn't force any of us to adhere to any of his counsel instructions through the Bible. But it is disingenuous to paint a biblical principle of a woman submitting to her husband like she's not loved in that process. The Bible specifically says, husbands, love your wives like Christ loves the church. And you should love your wife very much so. She should also realize that she needs to obey the commandment of submission. Both of those are important. And yes, we can't forget men submitting to God. Now, for most modern women, they don't like that. They don't like the Bible. They don't like the idea that a woman is a helpmate. They want to be the main characters. They want to, it's kind of like, I've used this example before, right? It's kind of like how the serpent in the biblical story of Eve convinced the woman that she could be like God. The only difference now is you can be a man. That's the deception. How can you be a man? It's not eat the fruit. The fruit now doesn't represent the fruit on the tree. The fruit now represents a degree. It represents, I pay my own bills, right? I do all this stuff all by myself. And the question after it's all said and done is, did you have a good time? This is general. This is a general. No, I'm not talking about her. But she's a part of that. That's the question. Did you have a good time? And hey, if you can look back and like Melyssa Ford and say, no regrets, I don't regret a single thing, and you tell a story that sounds like a nightmare to me, which makes me feel bad for her or any woman who's been through this, then you're allowed to have that opinion as well. But I just had to say that about the Bible in specific, and God, who she was upset represents a father and a more masculine figure, it sounded like.
So my mother had me, and my godmother Renata had a daughter named Laura, and we were not raised religious at all. To the point where I literally told my mom, I was like, can I go to Catholic school? She was like, no.
Let me say this to give her some grace here and give her a point that she's very much making, in a sense, is religion can definitely get insane and crazy, right? And that happens when people now detach themselves from principles that I talked about earlier, like basic principles like how you treat others, love, so on and so forth. It has its dark parts, just like everything else. You can be very patriotic, but then that patriotism can also go too far to the right. You can be very passionate about something. Now, when that passion puts you in a position where you're neglecting the people you love, your family, and they never see you, so on and so forth, whatever it is, then that becomes, toxic.
I really just wanted to go because I liked the uniforms and I didn't want to look for something to wear every single day. But my mother was steadfast that no, any curiosity that you have with religion, you can go and seek that out on your own. But I'm not going to hold you to, an indoctrination that doesn't really belong to you. You make your own choices. And so when it came to checking boxes, my mom had already decided what my daughter's life is for her to live. And I'm lucky in that way. Very, very lucky in that way. My mom gave me suggestions and she made observations, but they were always so subtle. And she always knew that I was going to do whatever I wanted to do, however I wanted to do it. And that was the end of the story. I was a very strong-willed child, strong-willed teenager, strong-willed young lady, strong-willed adult woman. So I was never subject to those checked boxes, but I found myself in conversation over the years with many, many women that felt that pressure. And when it comes to those checked boxes, as it relates to marriage, I'm not sure if the vast majority of us go looking for these as factors in why we choose somebody. I think a lot of the times, as long as he's a good provider, that's the biggest check mark. Does he look good? Is he presentable? Do we have some things in common? Does he plan on being a good provider? Do we both want kids? Do we both want to get married? These are the things that people ask themselves, and this is what helps them make their decision. But they find out years into the marriage that it takes so much more to make a marriage successful than just those things. One of the main things that I think is missing,
what is it,
from a lot of people deciding on getting married is how much of a friendship have you built with this person? Because like outlasts love 1,000% of the time. Through the course of my career.
Okay, that's a good point. Right? And she's probably realized this a bit far too late. Like does outlast love, but more, commitment to values and shared values there too. I thought she was going to say love, but I agree with that. In fact, that's something that I actually had to learn later than I probably would have liked. And being married now, I see that more and more. I was under the assumption for a little bit that you couldn't have a friendship with your wife. I think I've made maybe like a couple of videos that talked about don't treat your wife like she's your friend. And I think the reason why I've heard men who are older than me counsel in that way And I also believed that personally. The purpose there is that someone can start mixing up you and confusing you for just a friend. And as a man, you lose that respect. But there's a book, and it's written by the Gottmans. Let's see if I can find it. How to Make Marriage Work, I think it's called. If you're soon to be married, engaged, that's a book I would suggest. Definitely helps. It's called, here it is, The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work, John M. Gottman. And in that book, they do a lot of extensive studies with couples who have all types of different dynamics when it comes to how they communicate, when it comes to how they argue and how they fight. And they found out that it wasn't really how couples really fought. You had couples who didn't fight that much, but still didn't last long in marriage. You had couples who did go back and forth often. But the one thing they realized is these couples that lasted didn't grow apart over time. Sure, you can interject right now and say something off the wall like, you can't control another person. It could fail at any time. Yes. Anything can happen at any time. Right. But if you're somebody who values marriage, then it is in your best interest to then think, how can I make this a more pleasant situation? How can I set myself up for success as much as possible, seeing as how it's one of the most risky things you can be doing in today's society? And then on top of that, you go over to fathershaverights.com and get yourself the #1 guide to drafting a solid and legally binding prenuptial agreement. That was put together by some renowned top attorneys, hosted by yours truly, Chisha Zed. Get it for free with offer code REVIEW. Go check that out. Then you want to look at ways you can make the marriage last as long as humanly possible, which is interesting. James Sexton, who's one of the attorneys at fathershaverights.com, who introduces the legal information, he says marriage is one of the only things we hope ends in death, right? So you hope and you wish, I hope I die with this person. But friendship is important in the sense that people usually grow apart because they don't talk and they don't grow with each other. And so in today's busy culture, it's really easy for that to happen. And it's important to go out of your way to make sure that you're checking in with your significant other. You have to intentionally do this. You have to ask the person where their mind's at, how things are going. Because if you don't, then someone's mind could be in a whole different place. And finally, the moment you realize that things are effed up is within a therapy session, and people usually say, at that point, it's way too late. Or, God forbid, she goes on TikTok and she's telling everybody what she's really thinking, like these chicks are doing today. So, yes, friendship is important. And yes, you can maintain friendship without losing respect.
And just life in general. I have spoken to so many successfully married couples, and success means that they still like each other decades later. That's success. They still wake up and want to participate in this partnership. That is success. And that's what they say, that like is more substantial than love. Exactly. And looking back on my relationships, I realized that like was not high on my list of priorities. And that's probably the reason for failures. So before I sign off.
All right, so that's everything. I think I've said everything I could pretty much say. I'll say this also. If you're somebody who looks at this, and particularly if you're a chick who's like, I don't mind this. In fact, I think this is great. I don't mind replicating this in my own life, which she's gone through in her experiences. And I don't mind claiming childless cat lady. And in the end, I'm fine with it. Then go have a blast. I think that's your prerogative. You're definitely allowed to decide your own fate. I don't have a problem with people who know that I think it's great. I think it's better that people know they don't want families than end up with a child and then really can't take care of that child properly and treat that child like they somehow did them wrong. All right, that's what I think of when I look at this. A lot in here that I was very honest with. Overall, I wish her the best, and I hope she finds peace, and her podcast will take off because there are plenty of women out there with the exact same experience and story. Listen, guys, of course, I'm curious to know, what do you think? Leave your comments down below. I appreciate you always for checking out yet another episode of The Coffee Pod. Remember, fathershaverights.com for my men who are engaged or soon to be married. If you're going to get married, why wouldn't you want to know and have as much resources available to you as possible? Go over there and get the guide. Get the guide. There's an invaluable, you can do that, or you can go pay an attorney like $500 for a session, or you could get it for free at fathershaverights.com. Offer code REVIEW. And you can find out how to set up a solid and legally binding prenuptial agreement, or maybe you decide, hey, I don't want one, which is cool. That's a win in itself too. Consider joining Brew Brothers if you are a father and married. We actually have a guest that's going to be coming to Brew Brothers, and he's doing an introduction to cryptocurrency investing. This isn't anybody who's like proposing an investment opportunity or anything like that. No, this is just if you've thought of investing and wanted to get involved in it, and you've had questions about crypto, what it is, how you could get started. No opportunity for you, just all education. We have somebody coming in to talk about that who's been an expert in the industry for the past 7 years. Guys, till next time, I'm out. Peace.